All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Knowledge acquisition, continuous strategic, reflective learning, and integral theory, written by Conrad, Riker, available now. Links in description. The pokey logic of trauma. How feeling became fact and justice became therapy. I watched a dean tell a young man he couldn't see the evidence against him. Not because it didn't exist, not because it was classified, because reviewing it might re-traumatize the person who accused him. The room had fluorescent lights, a folding table, a printed policy, no cross-examination, no counsel, just a woman with a lanyard explaining that his request for specifics constituted a pattern of destabilizing behavior. He'd asked twice. Notice the architecture. A claim is made. The claim cannot be tested, because testing is redefined as harm. Doubt is no longer epistemic, it's ethical, and the ethics run one direction. The accuser feels pain, therefore something happened. The accused asks what, therefore he is causing more pain. The entire machinery pivots on a single hidden axiom, that internal feeling is a more reliable witness than external fact. Nobody states this. Nobody votes on it. It simply becomes operational, the way gravity becomes operational when you step off a ledge. But here is the fracture they cannot patch. If subjective experience is the supreme standard of truth, then the accused's experience is also truth. His terror, his confusion, his sense of injustice, these are feelings too. The doctrine cannot dismiss them without abandoning its own first principle. It does dismiss them constantly, which tells you the principle was never the point. The point is who holds power over definitions. And the answer is always whoever the bureaucracy has chosen to protect. I've sat in those rooms, I've read the policy manuals, I know what the word safety means now. It means you lose before you begin. The dogma in one page. Dogma, trauma-informed accusation culture, official claim, a procedural doctrine asserting that subjective emotional impact, trauma supersedes objective factual verification in determining guilt, shifting the burden of proof from the accuser to the accused and treating skepticism as a form of violence. Hidden axiom. Subjective feeling is ontologically superior to objective fact. Therefore, the internal state of the accuser is a more reliable indicator of reality than external evidence. Power transfer. Authority transfers from the impartial judge and the rule of law to the therapeutic bureaucrat and the victim advocate. The household and the individual's reputation are transferred from the domain of personal responsibility to the domain of state-sanctioned emotional management. Socratic question: if the accuser's subjective feeling is the ultimate standard of truth, and two people can have contradictory feelings about the same event, which feeling is true? And who decides which feeling is more true without appealing to an objective standard outside of feeling? Dr. Wynona's sacred defense? The fluorescent panels of room 214, Hillman College Title IX Tribunal, buzzed at a frequency only the anxious could hear. Dr. Wynona, feminist Marxist, certified trauma-informed equity adjudicator, adjusted her lanyard, the one reading believe, support, center, and placed both palms flat on the table, the way a priest places the gospel on the lectern before reading. "We are gathered," she said, "not in the spirit of accusation, but in the spirit of care." The accused, a sophomore named Daniel, sat across from her with a printed timeline, 3 pages of Discord logs, and a witness list. His advisor had told him to bring evidence. Dr. Winona looked at the papers the way a veterinarian looks at a bone a dog has dragged onto the carpet. "Before we proceed," she said, "I want to acknowledge that this space is survivor-centered. What does that mean? It means we do not treat disclosure as a debate. We do not treat pain as a prompt for cross-examination. We do not enter this room carrying the fantasy that truth is something we extract from a survivor, like a confession under interrogation." She paused. The institutional silence did the work a gavel would have done. The old model, and I want you to feel the weight of how wrong it was, imagined that justice was a machine. You put evidence in one side and a verdict came out the other. But whose machine was that? Who built it? It was built by minds trained to see a human being in pain and respond with "prove it," as if suffering were a legal brief, as if the trembling were not testimony enough. Daniel opened his mouth. Dr. Winona raised a hand gently, the way one raises a hand to stop a child from touching a stove. "I see you preparing to speak, and I honor that instinct, but I want you to sit with something first. When a survivor comes forward, when she names what happened to her, that act of naming is not a claim submitted for your approval. It is a revelation. The question is not whether you believe it. The question is whether you are capable of receiving it." She turned to the hearing note-taker, a graduate student with a checklist and a concerned posture. "I want to note for the record that the respondent exhibited visible frustration when the word revelation was used. This is not unusual. The puzzle-solving mind, the mind that has been trained to dissect, to categorize, to demand evidence before it will extend the most basic human compassion, that mind experiences the language of care as a threat. It cannot process what it cannot control, and so it reaches for its tools, timelines, logs, witness statements. It builds a fort out of paper and calls it due process." She said due process the way a minister might say mammon, acknowledging its existence in the world, while signaling that devotion to it was a spiritual sickness. Let me be clear about what trauma-informed practice is and why it is not optional. Trauma is not merely a psychological condition. It is an epistemology. When someone says "I was harmed," that statement emerges from a body that knows what happened to it. The body does not lie. The nervous system does not fabricate. What the survivor feels is not a reaction to reality. It is reality, felt and carried in the only way a human being can carry it, through experience. She straightened the fidget toys she had placed on the table, a soft blue square, a textured stone, a small koala with weighted beads, accoutrements of the liturgy. "Now, I know what the old framework would say. It would say, but feelings can be mistaken. A person can feel harmed by something that didn't happen, and to that I say, you are confusing the map with the territory. You are assuming that your external observation of events is more real than her internal experience of them. Who gave you that authority? Who told you that your eyes see more clearly than her nervous system?" Daniel's advisor, a thin man in an off-the-rack blazer, leaned forward. "Dr. Feminist Marxist, with respect, the standard here is preponderance of evidence. We're not asking you to ignore her experience. We're asking whether the event occurred." Dr. Winona smiled. It was the smile of someone who had heard this objection 900 times and had 900 responses filed and catalogued. "You say whether the event occurred as if there were an event independent of the experience of it. But let me ask you this, if she feels violated, what is the event you're looking for? Are you looking for a bruise? A text message? A witness who saw what you have already decided counts as harm. You are defining reality before you have listened to the person who lived it. That is not inquiry, that is imposition." She let the word land. Trauma-informed practice asks us to do something radical, something the patriarchal legal mind finds almost unbearable. It asks us to treat the survivor's testimony not as one piece of evidence among many, but as the ground upon which all other evidence is interpreted. Her experience is the lens. Everything else, your timelines, your Discord logs, your witness statements, these are filtered through the central sacred fact that a human being came forward and said, "This happened to me." The note-taker wrote something. Dr. Winona took this as ratification. I understand that this feels like a departure from what you were taught. You were taught that justice is blind, but blindness is not justice. Blindness is refusal. Refusal to see power. Refusal to see asymmetry. Refusal to see that the person sitting across from you has been carrying something that you, in your puzzle-solving confidence, have never had to carry. Trauma-informed care asks you to open your eyes, to see that the survivor is not making a claim, she is making a disclosure, and disclosure is not tested. Disclosure is held. Daniel looked at his printed timeline. The words on it had begun to feel like artifacts from a dead religion. Now, Dr. Winona continued, I want to address something that will come up, because it always comes up. Someone will say, what if the accusation is false? What if the person is lying? And I want to be very precise here. The question itself is already an act of violence. You cannot ask, what if she's lying, without first assuming that her testimony is the kind of thing that could be a lie, without treating her words as suspect by default. The very framing of the question positions the survivor as guilty of deception until proven honest. That is the logic of the patriarchy. That is the logic that has silenced survivors for centuries. She placed a hand on the blue fidget square. It compressed softly. In this room, we do not ask whether the survivor is lying. We ask, what does she need? And if the answer is safety, then safety is what we provide. If the answer is for the respondent to be removed from shared spaces, then removal is what happens. Not as punishment, I want to be clear about this, but as protection. Protection of the survivor. Protection of the community. Protection of the sacred trust between disclosure and response. The grad student wrote, respondent removal equals protective, not punitive. Now, I notice, and I want to name this gently, that the respondent has brought a great deal of paper to this proceeding. She gestured toward Daniel's 3 pages, and I want us to sit with what that means. The impulse to document, to build a case, to construct a counter-narrative, this is what we in trauma studies call DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. The very act of preparing a defense is, in the trauma-informed framework, a data point, not proof of guilt necessarily, but a pattern. A behavior we have seen before in respondents who experience the survivor's disclosure as an injury to themselves. Daniel's advisor closed his eyes briefly. It was the expression of a man watching a river change course and knowing that every map was now wrong. I want to be fair, Dr. Winona said, and the word fair sat on the table like a confiscated weapon she was allowing them to look at, but not touch. I want to be fair, so I will hear what you have brought. But I want you to understand, in this framework, the survivor's experience is not equal to your evidence. It is prior to it. It is the foundation on which this proceeding rests. If your evidence contradicts her experience, then the question is not who is right. The question is, what is your evidence asking us to ignore? She looked at Daniel directly. I know this is hard. I know it feels like the ground has shifted, but let me offer you something that might feel like a gift, even though it may not feel like one right now. The old system, the one you're reaching for, with its burden of proof and its standards of evidence and its cross-examination, that system was not built for survivors, it was built against them. Every protection you are invoking was designed, over centuries, by men who could not conceive of being accused and so built a fortress around the accused. We are not dismantling justice, we are building it. For the first time, on the foundation of lived experience, not legal abstraction. She straightened the koala. It stared at Daniel with black, weighted eyes. So, I will receive your documents, but I want you to know before you speak that in this room compassion is the standard, and the survivor's truth is the measure of compassion. If what you are about to say causes her to feel unsafe, and we will know because she will tell us, and we will believe her, then what you are about to say is not evidence, it is harm. And this room does not permit harm. She folded her hands. Whenever you're ready, debunking the dogma. The dogma on the table. The doctrine under examination calls itself trauma-informed practice, Strip the therapeutic veneer and the machinery becomes visible. Subjective emotional impact, not objective factual verification, determines guilt. The burden of proof shifts from accuser to accused. Skepticism itself is recoded as violence. The question is no longer did it happen. The question is, do you accept how she feels about it? That is not a tribunal. That is a séance. Consider the Title IX hearing room. A male student sits before a panel. His accuser has told her story. He brings 3 pages of Discord logs, a printed timeline, a witness list. He points out contradictions in her account. The hearing officer does not address his evidence. The officer addresses his tone. His calm, logical cross-examination is reframed as aggressive gaslighting. His composure is pathologized. His rationality is entered into the record as a symptom. He is suspended not for what he did, but for how he defended himself against what he is accused of. This is the dogma. Feeling outranks fact, accusation outranks evidence, and the accused is guilty until the bureaucracy decides his compliance qualifies as innocence. The formula is simple. Subjective offense plus undefined harm, word plus sacred claimant equals forbidden defense. The process is the punishment, and the punishment is the verdict. Why it feels holy. The doctrine announces itself as compassion. It claims to protect the vulnerable from the violence of power. Its priests wrap themselves in the language of care, safety, and healing. Who could oppose safety? Who could question care? This is the bait. The switch follows. To question how safety is determined, whose care is prioritized, and what counts as violence becomes evidence that you are yourself unsafe. The doctrine seals itself against dissent by defining dissent as the disease. You are not arguing against a procedure, you are re-traumatizing the survivor. Your disagreement is the wound, your demand for evidence is the assault. Dr. Winona, feminist Marxist, the fictional adjudicator, articulates the sacred claim with ceremonial gravity. The survivor's testimony is not a claim to be tested, it is revelation. The body does not lie. The nervous system does not fabricate. To doubt is to wound, to verify is to violate. Notice the religious grammar: revelation, sacred, receive, believe. This is not jurisprudence. This is liturgy, and the accused is the heretic whose very presence profanes the rite. The doctrine feels holy because it borrows the moral weight of real compassion and attaches it to a procedural abolition of due process. It hijacks the Christian imperative to care for the suffering and converts it into an institutional license to punish without proof. The hidden axiom, buried beneath the therapeutic vocabulary, is a single catastrophic claim. Subjective feeling is ontologically superior to objective fact. The internal state of the accuser is treated as a more reliable indicator of reality than external evidence. This is not science, this is not law. This is Gnostic revelation, the accuser as oracle, her trauma as scripture, and the accused as heretic for requesting cross-examination. Here is the syllogism the doctrine demands you accept. Premise 1. Trauma causes suffering. Premise 2. Questioning a trauma narrative causes suffering. Premise 3. Therefore, questioning a trauma narrative is trauma. Conclusion. Skepticism is violence. Belief is justice. The conclusion does not follow. The syllogism commits a stolen concept. It uses the tools of reason, premise, inference, conclusion, to abolish reason's authority. The moment you accept that feelings are unfalsifiable, you accept that truth is whatever the most persuasive sufferer says it is. A feeling can be false, a memory can distort, a sincere person can be sincerely wrong. These are not insults. They are the known limits of human cognition, which is precisely why civilization built evidentiary standards, not to deny suffering, but to prevent suffering from becoming a weapon. The power transfer under the old order, the order of Magna Carta, Roman law, Mosaic justice, authority rested with the impartial judge and the rule of law, evidence was sovereign, cross-examination was the shield of the accused. The burden of proof belonged to the one making the claim. The accused was presumed innocent until proven guilty by facts, testable by both sides. Under this doctrine, authority transfers to the therapeutic bureaucrat and the victim advocate. The household, the individual's reputation, the father's name, all are transferred from the domain of personal responsibility and civic right into the domain of state-sanctioned emotional management. The state does not govern your conduct, it governs your feelings. And since feelings are infinite, variable, and unfalsifiable, the state's jurisdiction becomes infinite, variable, and unfalsifiable. Here is the formula. Destroy evidence as the standard, and you make the arbiter omnipotent. The bureaucrat decides what is real. The accuser decides what is violent. The accused decides nothing. He is not a defendant. He is a patient diagnosed, treated, and removed. His consent to the process is irrelevant. His objection to the process is pathology. The protected contradiction. The doctrine claims to protect the vulnerable from the violence of power, yet it centralizes absolute, uncheckable power in the hands of the accuser, who defines the trauma, and the bureaucratic arbiter, who defines safety. The accused is rendered powerless to defend himself using the very logic and evidence that constitute the standard of truth in every other sphere of human endeavor. If you build a system to protect against abuse of power, and that system has no mechanism for protecting its own power from abuse, then you have not built protection. You have built a new tyranny wearing the language of therapy. The contradiction is protected by a Kafka trap. If the accused accepts the process, he accepts the premise that his guilt is determined by the accuser's feeling. If he challenges the process, his challenge is entered as evidence that he is unsafe, aggressive, and in need of the very removal he is protesting. Silence is guilt. Denial is lack of insight. Apology is admission. Evidence requests are retaliation. There is no exit. The system is designed to produce exactly one outcome regardless of facts. The accused is processed, the accuser is validated, the bureaucracy is expanded. The fallacy stack. The doctrine is not a single error. It is a cascade of errors, each supporting the next, designed to make rational challenge impossible without triggering a new accusation. Appeal to emotion, argumentum ad passiones. The visceral image of trauma is used to bypass logical scrutiny. You cannot question the claim because the imagery of suffering makes questioning itself feel cruel. Circular reasoning. The trauma is real because it is felt. The feeling is valid because it is trauma. No external standard is permitted to break the circle. Equivocation. Trauma shifts between clinical condition and social grievance. Safety shifts between physical protection and emotional comfort. Violence shifts between physical force and cognitive dissent. Strawman. Due process is equated with violence against the accuser. The right to question evidence is recast as a right to abuse. False dilemma. Either you believe her completely, or you are part of the system that harms her. No third option, examine evidence fairly, is admitted. Kafka trap. Denial is evidence of guilt. Frustration is evidence of aggression. Calm logic is evidence of gaslighting. No true Scotsman. Counter-examples of false claims are dismissed as not real trauma. Ad hominem. The tone of the accused, not the content of his defense, is attacked. His manner, his confidence, his refusal to flatter, all are entered as evidence. Moving the goalposts, standards of proof shift from preponderance of evidence to reasonable belief, to whatever satisfies the accuser's emotional state. Concept creep. Violence expands to include disagreement. Harm expands to include discomfort. Abuse expands to include boundary setting. Safety expands to include immunity from challenge. Thought-stopping label. Words like inappropriate, toxic, unsafe, and problematic avoid naming the rule, the act, the context, and the limiting principle. They are conclusions without arguments. Gish Gallop. The institution floods the zone with emotional narrative to drown out factual counter-evidence. Each fallacy reinforces the others. The result is a rhetorical fortress, impenetrable to reason, precisely because reason itself has been classified as one of the defenses the fortress exists to neutralize. The satanic inversion ledger. The natural order holds that truth is discovered through evidence and reason, the faculty the Greeks called logos, the principle by which reality becomes intelligible. Justice requires impartiality, one standard applied to all, regardless of sex, status, pain, or narrative. The inversion holds that truth is constructed through feeling and power. Justice becomes partiality, where the victim is presumed right until proven wrong by a standard she herself defines. Examine the specific inversions. Epistemological inversion. The doctrine asserts that the accuser's internal experience is more real than external observation. But reality is what remains true regardless of how you feel about it. A claim that cannot be tested against evidence is not a truth claim. It is a confession of faith. And faith, however sincere, is not the basis for suspending another person's rights. Moral inversion. Compassion becomes cruelty. The doctrine claims to care, but it cares selectively for the accuser, never for the accused. It calls its one-sidedness survivor-centered. But a process that centers one party before hearing both is not justice. It is a predetermined verdict dressed in procedural language. Legal inversion. The presumption of innocence, the right to face one's accuser, the right to examine evidence, the right to an impartial tribunal, all are inverted. The accused is presumed harmful. His accuser is shielded from challenge. His evidence is filtered through the accuser's narrative. The tribunal is not impartial, it is trauma-informed, which means it has already decided whose trauma counts. Spiritual inversion. The doctrine mimics religious structure without religious accountability. It has priests, advocates, sacraments, accusations, scripture, lived experience, heresy, skepticism, and excommunication, cancellation. But it has no confession, no repentance, no restitution, no reconciliation. It cannot forgive because it cannot define what would constitute absolution. It can only punish endlessly, recursively, without closure. Satanic inversion is not a metaphor here. It is a structural description. The good justice is recast as evil, retraumatization, and the evil accusation without evidence is recast as good believing survivors. The light bringer inverts the light, so that men call darkness compassion and call compassion harm. The trivium repair. The trivium grammar, logic, rhetoric is the classical immune system of civilization. It is how free men distinguish truth from manipulation. It is how we repair the damage. Grammar. Force every word back into definition. What exact words or acts are alleged? Define harm, define offense, define unsafe, define abuse, define harassment, define misogyny. Inappropriate under which written rule. With what quoted words, what context, what intent, what actual harm, what comparator, and what limiting principle? If the institution cannot answer these questions, it has no charge. It has fog. Logic. Test the accusation against the claim. Does the accusation answer the claim or evade it? Does the evidence address the event or the feeling about the event? Would the same standard apply if the sexes were reversed? If the politics were reversed, if the status were reversed? What evidence would disprove the accusation? If the answer is none, the claim is unfalsifiable and therefore non-scientific, non-legal, and non-binding on a rational man. Is the standard objective and sex-neutral, or purely subjective? Is the accusation formal enough to answer, or informal enough to smear? Rhetoric. Name the move calmly and refuse to concede. We can discuss my tone after we define the claim. Please state the exact allegation in writing. Discomfort is not proof of harm. I will correct discourtesy. I will not confess to an undefined offense. Would this standard apply if the sexes or politics were reversed? What evidence would change your conclusion? Let us return to the original claim. The trivium is not aggression. It is the minimum intellectual hygiene that separates a civilization from a mob. A man who cannot define his terms cannot defend his rights. A man who cannot test a logical claim cannot detect a lie. A man who cannot name a rhetorical trick will be manipulated by every institution that deploys one. The natural law restoration. Natural law is older than statute. It is the grammar written into human nature, the obligation to honor truth, protect the innocent, punish the guilty proportionally, reward virtue, discourage vice, and preserve the forms that make human flourishing possible. Under natural law, justice requires one standard applied to all. No class of persons receives presumption of truth. No class receives presumption of guilt. The standard is evidence, examined publicly by both sides. Offense is not harm. One can be offended without being harmed. Harm requires a named act, a measurable injury, a causal link, and a proportionate remedy. Discomfort is the price of living among human beings who disagree. Feeling is not testimony. A feeling is a datum, not a verdict. It must be tested like any other datum, against context, against contradiction, against memory's known unreliability, against motive, against evidence. Accusation requires accountability. False, reckless, and malicious accusations must carry consequences equal to the harm they inflict. A system that punishes the accused but never the false accuser is not a justice system. It is a weapons system. Care must serve justice, not replace it. Care that detaches from truth becomes indulgence. Care that detaches from accountability becomes enablement. Care that detaches from the accused's humanity becomes cruelty dressed in therapeutic language. The restoration is not revenge. It is the re-establishment of the conditions under which men, women, and children can trust institutions, build families, and live without fear that an unprovable accusation will destroy their names. A civilization that cannot distinguish feeling from fact, accusation from evidence, and care from coercion has no future. It will devour its own sons in the name of protecting its daughters and call the feast justice. The question that breaks the spell. One question demolishes the entire structure. If the accuser's subjective feeling is the ultimate standard of truth, and two people can have contradictory feelings about the same event, which feeling is true, and who decides without appealing to an objective standard outside of feeling? The doctrine cannot answer. It collapses into self-contradiction. It claims all truth is subjective, then asserts its own interpretation as objectively binding. It says, listen to lived experience, then silences any lived experience that contradicts its premises. If feelings are infallible, then the accused If only certain feelings count, then the doctrine has admitted an external standard for ranking feelings, which means feelings are not the ultimate standard after all. The arbiter is. And the arbiter is not God, not law, not evidence, not reason. The arbiter is the bureaucrat with the koala figurine and the lanyard that says believe, support center. The spell breaks the moment a man refuses to accept that his capacity for reason is a symptom, and his demand for evidence is a crime. The spell breaks when he names the move, defines the terms, and insists on the same standard for all. Truth is independent of feeling. A feeling can be false. Therefore, feelings must be tested against evidence, not elevated above it. Justice requires one standard applied to all, regardless of sex, regardless of pain, regardless of narrative. Offense is not harm, feeling is not fact, trauma is not testimony, and a civilization that forgets this will discover, too late, that it traded its inheritance for a therapy session, and its sons paid the invoice. Meninist reversal. Counter-dogma, the Meninist reversal of trauma-informed accusation culture. The Meninist move is not to build the same idol with the sexes swapped. It is to undo the inversion. The feminist dogma begins by sanctifying a prior frame. The Meninist reversal begins by making the frame answer to reality. The doctrine on the table is trauma-informed accusation culture. Its first trick is to make a moral conclusion feel like a settled premise. The reversal is to force every premise through definition, evidence, reciprocity, proportion, and consequence. The reversal principle. Every feminist dogma in this family performs the same basic operation. It moves authority from observable acts to protected interpretation. The Meninist counter-dogma moves authority back from interpretation to act, evidence, duty, and consequence. From identity to act, judge what was done, not the moral status assigned to the body of the speaker. From feeling to evidence, treat distress as a signal to investigate, not as proof of the conclusion. From exception to reciprocity, no rule is just if it only works in one direction. From bureaucracy to responsibility, institutions must prove why their intervention improves justice rather than merely expanding power. From slogan to burden, every slogan must name its definitions, controls, limiting principle, and falsification test. Axis by axis reversal. Feminist inversion, believe the victim. Concealed move, moves the goalposts from did it happen to do you accept my feeling about it? Institutional result, due process is suspended in favor of safety. The accused is guilty until the bureaucracy decides otherwise. Meninist reversal, truth is independent of feeling. A feeling can be false, so feelings must be tested against evidence, not elevated above it. Feminist inversion, microaggressions divided by emotional violence. Concealed move, converts minor social friction into systemic oppression, justifying disproportionate institutional punishment. Institutional result, HR departments and schools become tribunals of tone, where safety is defined by the sensitivity of the most fragile participant. Meninist reversal, offense is subjective, harm is objective. One can be offended without being harmed. Justice requires distinguishing the two. Feminist inversion, trauma-informed care. Concealed move, state power is laundered through the neutral, caring language of therapy, making dissent appear as resistance to healing. Institutional result, bureaucrats gain unchecked discretion to define normal behavior and punish deviations as symptoms of the patriarchal disease. Meninist reversal, therapy is private, justice is public. The state should not be the therapist of the citizenry, nor the arbiter of their emotional well-being. The Meninist Charter, define the act before assigning guilt, require evidence before sanction, preserve the burden of proof, reject one-way compassion that abolishes justice, audit institutional incentives before trusting institutional language, restore male authority where male responsibility is demanded, protect children, household integrity, and due process from therapeutic slogans. Use the sex swap test until the hidden privilege in the doctrine is exposed. The breaking question remains the gateway. If the accuser's subjective feeling is the ultimate standard of truth, and two people can have contradictory feelings about the same event, which feeling is true? And who decides which feeling is more true without appealing to an objective standard outside of feeling? Field guide. Dogma phrase, believe the victim. Hidden move, moves the goalposts from did it happen to do you accept my feeling about it? Reality test, what definition, evidence, reciprocal standard, and consequence would make this claim false? Watch for argumentum ad passiones, appeal to emotion, divided by Lee. Counter move, truth is independent of feeling. A feeling can be false. So feelings must be tested against evidence, not elevated above it. Dogma phrase, microaggressions, emotional violence. Hidden move, converts minor social friction into systemic oppression, justifying disproportionate institutional punishment. Reality test, what definition, evidence, reciprocal standard, and consequence would make this claim false? Watch for equivocation, conflating offense with harm. Counter move, offense is subjective, harm is objective. One can be offended without being harmed. Justice requires distinguishing the two. Dogma phrase, trauma-informed care. Hidden move, state power is laundered through the neutral, caring language of therapy, making dissent appear as resistance to healing. Reality test, what definition, evidence, reciprocal standard, and consequence would make this claim false? Watch for appeal to authority, clinical authority. Counter move, therapy is private, justice is public. The state should not be the therapist of the citizenry, nor the arbiter of their emotional well-being. The detonating question, if the accuser's subjective feeling is the ultimate standard of truth, and two people can have contradictory feelings about the same event, which feeling is true? And who decides which feeling is more true without appealing to an objective standard outside of feeling? The rule. I want you to leave this essay with something forged so deep into your mind that no future shock, no slogan, no sophisticated accusation, no tearful campus tribunal can dislodge it. I learned this the hard way. I watched institutions I once respected bend the knee to a doctrine that said a woman's tears constitute evidence and a man's calm constitutes violence. I watched a friend lose a year of his life, his scholarship, his name, because he committed the unforgivable sin of asking basic chronological questions when accused of something that supposedly happened 18 months prior at a party neither party could precisely locate on a calendar. His crime was puzzle brain. His crime was wanting to know what happened before agreeing that he was the villain. His skepticism was reframed as aggression. His memory as gaslighting. His composure as sociopathy. They did not want truth. They wanted confession. They wanted the ritual performance of male surrender to female feeling, as if feeling were a Eucharist and doubt were blasphemy. I examined that system, word by word, definition by definition, incentive by incentive, and I realized the entire architecture was a language game. Trauma had been equivocated into meaning both a clinical condition and a synonym for any negative emotion. Safety had been captured to mean insulation from disagreement. Believe women had been smuggled past the customs of epistemology as if it were compassion rather than the abolition of evidence. Every single one of these terms collapsed the moment I refused to let them remain fuzzy. The moment I demanded definitions, the magic stopped working. The moment I asked for falsifiability conditions, the doctrine threw a tantrum. The moment I asked whether the same rule applied if the sexes were reversed, the silence was so loud I could hear the foundations of Western jurisprudence groaning in their grave. So here is your sword. Carry it into every classroom, every HR meeting, every family court hallway, every dinner table where someone repeats the liturgy of the new faith. One rule, 4 tests. Impossible to defeat, because each test is simply reality, refusing to lie. No doctrine is moral if it cannot survive definition, evidence, reciprocity, and the sex swap test. If its advocates cannot tell you precisely what their words mean, they are concealing the real claim. If they cannot show you what evidence would falsify their position, they are not making a truth claim. They are issuing a command. If the rule does not bind both parties equally, it is not justice. It is a shackle disguised as fairness. And if the entire argument sounds monstrous when you swap the pronouns, it was never a principle. It was a heist wearing principles clothing. Hold that line. The logos is not negotiable. The truth does not care about your trauma narrative. Reality is still real, and you are still a man obligated to defend it. Sponsored book. Knowledge acquisition. Continuous, strategic, reflective learning, and integral theory. The modern landscape is a cacophony of emotive drivel, a grotesque theater where biological reality is sacrificed on the altar of the equality delusion. I have walked through the ruins of our universities and the boardrooms of our corporations, watching as competent men are silenced by a mob that operates on software installed by the Frankfurt School. My own evolution toward clarity began when I stopped trying to appease the irrational and started dissecting it with the cold, hard steel of Aristotelian logic. I realized that the chaos is not accidental. It is a calculated demolition of the hierarchies that built the West, driven by a gynocentric virus that seeks to erase the male imperative. We are witnessing the architecture of cultural pessimism in real time, and without a mental framework rooted in the immutable laws of nature, you will be consumed by it. We stand at a precipice, staring into the abyss of nihilism, yet the tools to pull ourselves back are ancient and proven. This text is not a passive collection of thoughts. It is a weapon. It is the result of years spent analyzing the mechanisms of the NPC mind, where Jonathan Haidt's moral foundations are warped by a cancerous ideological possession. These zombies do not think. They react with narcissistic irresponsibility and violence, programmed by a media complex designed to emasculate and confuse. We will deconstruct the feelings cult using Platonic forms, proving that objective truth exists independent of the screeching of the crowd. You will learn to view history not as a random series of events, but as a linear struggle between the competence of the patriarchy and the cyclic entropy of Marxism. If you are a man who feels his agency slipping away, who watches the news and sees a war declared on your very existence, then this manual is your shield. We will cover the biohistorical imperative of the patriarchy, and why your heritage is not something to be ashamed of, but a fortress to be rebuilt. You will master syllogistic warfare, a method so precise it will dismantle leftist hypocrisy instantly, leaving your opponents sputtering in the face of irrefutable logic. This is about reclaiming apex reason, separating the high-value signal of tradition from the low-value noise of modern discourse. You will learn the art of the frame, integrating the harsh truths of the manosphere with the dialectical rigor of Hegel to forge a legacy of competence. However, if you are here to find validation for your victimhood, or if you believe that feelings supersede biological facts, stop reading immediately. Put this book down and go back to your safe spaces, your therapy speak, and your delusions of equity. This is not for the weak-minded or those possessed by the ideological cancer of the left. There is no comfort here for those who refuse to see the economics of sex or the wall of reality. This manual is strictly for those ready to engage in the heavy lifting of intellectual sovereignty, to absorb the lessons of Roman Stoicism and the Lockean defense of property. The time for passive observation is over. We are entering a renaissance of masculine competence, and it requires a mind fortified against the mechanics of propaganda. You will learn to predict the structural chaos engineered by cultural pessimists and counter it with the unshakable certainty of reason. This is how you destroy the lies holding you back. This is how you seize control of your intellect and secure your place in history. Knowledge acquisition, continuous strategic, reflective learning, and integral theory. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.